The concept that we'll be covering in this video is variables. So to start off, let's create a new class and let's just call it variables. And it's going to give you a lot of unnecessary starter code, but you can just delete most of it and just keep the top, the one that says the class variables. And then we're going to type out public static void main and then in parentheses string and then brackets args, and then curly brackets to close it off. And in our examples, we'll be programming within the space here. Right. So the formal definition of a variable is a storage location for data within a program. To put it in simpler terms, let's think of it as an analogy. So let's say we have a box and we put items inside of the box. In this case, the box can be considered the variable and the items inside of it are the data. And similarly, programming approaches variables the same way as in math. In math, variables hold expressions or numeric values, and likewise in computer science, variables hold data. So in computer science, we use variables to make code more readable, less repetitive, and more condensed. We also use variables when we do not know the exact input of what we're dealing with, but we want to allow for scalability. So, in other words, we want to make the logic the same when it comes to constructing a program, and a variable allows the program to be logically consistent regardless of the inputs that we put into the program later. Now, in Java, there are four different types of data, and thus four different types of variables. So, let's go over what they are. So, first we have integers, and these are whole numbers without decimals. So, some examples can include 5, 10, 15, and 20. The second type we have are doubles. And these are numbers, but they can have decimals. So some examples include 5.5, 10.7, 15.2. But one thing that's important to note, it could also be 20.0. And there's a difference between 20 and 20.0. If it has 20.0, it has to be a double because integers cannot have any decimals. They have to be whole numbers. And third type we have are strings. And these are words usually. And the way that we could tell that it's a string is if it has quotation marks around it and the word goes in the middle. And these usually take up the most space within a program. And some examples can include hello world or hi, my name is blank. Hi, my name is blank. And then lastly, we have booleans. And these are the most simple and take up the least space, and it's either true or false. And those are the only two examples it could have. So it's either true or false. So now let's talk about how do we actually initialize or declare these variables. So to declare something, it simply means to create the variable, leaving it as empty or having no initial condition. But initializing a variable means it creates the variable and it assigns initial values to the variables. So to follow the form, to do this, we follow the format. Let's talk about declare, and that is it has the variable type, which are the things that we mentioned before, integer, double, strings, and boolean. Then we have the variable name, and that's just to declare it. But to initialize it, we have the variable type, then we have the variable name, and then we have a value here, and then a semicolon at the end. So let's start off with some examples for declaring a variable. So first would be int example 1, standing for integer. We can have double example 2, boolean example 3, which stands for true or false, or we can have string capital S example 4, and those are the words. Now some examples for initializing, we can have integer example 5 equals 5. We can have double example 6 is equal to 7.0. We could have boolean example 7 equal to true. And then we could have string example 8 as equal to hello. So one topic that's pretty important to grasp is the difference between a double and an integer. So it's kind of like in math how all squares can be rectangles, but all rectangles can't be squares. It's the same concept kind of applies. So like we said here, we could have 20.0 as a double, but we can't have 20.0 as an integer because no decimals are allowed. So even if we put 20 as a double, it would automatically turn into 20.0, but we cannot have 20.0 as an integer. So let's give some examples. So double example 9 is equal to 5. And this works because the compiler will automatically turn it into 5.0. And another example, double example 10 is equal to 5.0, and that works because zero point 0 is allowed as a decimal. However, if we did int example 11 as equal to 5.0, this won't work because integers are only allowed to have no decimals. They're not allowed to have decimals. So that's why it wouldn't work. But you could do um, the same as example 10 and make it a double here, and that would work. So one pattern that we can see whenever we're programming is that we always use the equal sign operator to assign a value to a variable. However, let's say we wanted to change some variable's name. We wouldn't have to write out double example 11 equals 10.0 because example 11 is already there. So we would just keep it as example 11. So we actually have a challenge for you guys to assess if you guys actually understand the concepts of variables or not. So the challenge is this. So first, initialize two variables, two variables, and it could be either of the four data types. So either of the four data types, and declare, then declare three variables, either of the four data types as well, and then assign values to the initialized variables, and then finally change the values of two of the declared variables. And the way that you can see if there's any compiling errors or not is, for instance, if you see this, there's a red line, it would say there's a compiling error. And you could also click compile on the top left corner to see if there are any errors with your code. So thank you for watching, and I hope you learned a little bit more about variables within Java.